This graphic reveals the anatomy of a global sound. Salsa functions as an evolving genetic code. The project began as a translation. Early musicians adapted ancient, strictly religious Afro-Cuban rhythms for the secular environment of a modern dance floor. This diagram isolates the breakthrough that occurred in 1932. Agustin Gutierrez took complex, sacred bongo patterns and combined them with Ignacio Piñero's modern brass arrangements. That mixture produced the first recorded track to use the terminology salsitza, but standard bands of the era, known as septetos, relied on light percussion and acoustic guitars. When these groups tried to play for loud, driving crowds on the street, their rhythm lacked the acoustic power to cut through the noise. This schematic traces the architectural solution. The band leader, Arsenio Rodríguez, stripped away the light string section and built a heavy conjunto setup. He anchored the low end with deep conga drums and added a piano to drive the rhythm permanently forward. The music now had physical weight. But to shatter the decorum of traditional ballrooms, this rhythmic foundation required a more aggressive, rebellious engine. This timeline tracks the groove's evolution. By the late 1930s, musicians pushed against the polite rules of the danzón, shattering traditional structure. Cellist Orestes Lopez and bassist Israel Cachao Lopez introduced wildly syncopated patterns, providing the mambo engine. This Venn diagram maps a cultural collision in 1950s New York City. The Afro-Cuban mambo engine met the brass-heavy arrangements of big band jazz. Where those forces met the dancers, you get the mambo explosion. All of this energy funneled into the Palladium ballroom. Every night, the dance floor served as a high-stakes proving ground for both musicians and audiences. This poster shows the heavyweight rivalry that defined the era. Tito Puente and Tito Rodríguez fought a relentless battle on that stage, forcing every musician in the building to master tighter orchestration and sharper percussion. The Palladium had polished the big band sound to a brilliant shine, but out on the streets, the incoming generation wanted a sound with a much grittier edge. As the 1960s approached, the orchestrated perfection of the Mambo Kings started to feel disconnected from life in the barrio. The streets demanded a more aggressive, raw sound. This diagram illustrates the sonic rebellion known as trombonga. Band leaders erased the bright traditional trumpets and replaced them with an all-trombone wall of sound to create a raw, street-level edge. Simultaneously, Nuyorican and Afro-Filipino youth were experimenting. They took the traditional rhythms of their parents and mixed them with the English R&B and soul ballads they heard on the radio. This mixing board visual maps out the Boogaloo crossover. Pioneers like Joe Cuba and Pete Rodriguez wired these two worlds together, blending English lyrics with traditional Latin percussion to create a definitive party anthem. This localized street energy was incredibly potent, but without a unifying structure to market it beyond the neighborhoods of New York, the movement lacked a way to survive long-term. That commercial structure arrived through Fania Records, an independent label that figured out how to package and weaponize this aggressive street energy. This diagram breaks down the Fania business loop. By combining guerrilla capitalism, wanted poster branding, and global supergroup tours, they unified these disparate street sounds under a single global brand, Salsa. This lineup shows the primary faces of the brand. Willie Colón, Hector Lavoe, Ruben Blades, and Celia Cruz served as the voices of the barrio, giving the music an uncompromisingly Latino identity. This era defined salsa dura, hard salsa. The music was intellectually dense and deeply political, focusing on narratives of social justice and barrio survival. Celia Cruz anchored this identity. Her vocal power and stage presence made her an untouchable global icon of Afro-Latina identity. Through a combination of musical innovation and street-level marketing, Fania Records successfully forged a global cultural brand out of New York and grit. But in the 1980s, the market shifted. The street-level grit of the previous decade was replaced by a more polished, sensual sound designed for the mainstream. This graphic breaks down the Great Salsa Divide. The genre moved away from the urban survival stories of salsa dura, focusing instead on the polished romance and bedroom ballads of salsa romantica. By the 1990s, the industry moved to professionalize the production process. RMM Records and producer Sergio Jorge began to re-architect the entire sound. This isometric diagram deconstructs the resulting New York sound. Moving up through the layers, Sergio George maintained the classic Clave roots at the bottom, layered in mainstream hip-hop aesthetics in the middle, and topped the mix with R&B-infused superstar vocals. This calculation worked. It successfully moved salsa out of the barrios and into the center of the American mainstream pop charts. This graphic shows that the underlying code has never stopped mutating. Focusing on the transition point, notice where the digital waveform becomes the traditional wood of the clave. The rhythmic core has proven remarkably resilient in the digital age. Today, producers continue to extract and fuse that DNA, blending traditional salsa structures with Dominican rhythms to create new crossover genres like bachata or bana. This map charts a century of expansion. Sweeping across the nodes, what began as isolated traditions in the Caribbean moved through the crucible of New York City before exploding into permanent cultural nodes across the globe. Born in sacred rituals and forged through street-level friction, this music adapted its own code to survive. Today, it functions as the definitive, unified Pan-Latino global identity.